Eric, welcome back to California. Let's talk. What do you got for
Wasn't there
us?
something about you can enter at any time you want, but you can never leave? Well, that was Hotel California, wasn't it? Well,
Well, you may be trapped here. We'll
they're
see.
talking about slamming down the gates on us here.
They sure are.
Just for what it's worth, here's the Shabbat Shalom, 3/20/21. Is this the 21st day of 2020? And they're talking about lockdown, so that's kind of scary. Kind of scary.
Don't cry.
Well, hey, you know, there's an interesting thing. The last videos we made just a month or two ago, we were talking about this word ayin dalet and ayin vav dalet, witness and testimony.
What's today's date?
And one of the things that we were mentioning is that ayin vav dalet means again and again, repeatedly, forcefully, that there's this witness of that whatever Yahweh says, it's always the same thing, and it's always more and more emphatic. And just to carry over on that subject, in Zechariah 1, verse 17, according to Stone's Tanakh here, it says, call out again saying, and why I'm saying it's 117 is that some people's Bibles have a different number of the verse. Thus says Yahweh Zavot, Master of Legions, is the way it's translated, my cities will once again spread out with bounty. Yahweh will have mercy on Zion once again, and he will choose Jerusalem once again. Oh, this was the first chapter of the book of Zechariah. And I'm not sure exactly what year Zechariah lived, but it was around 600 BC. So when was this once again? We're being told that once again, Yahuwah will let his cities that were completely destroyed and smashed and his people scattered into captivity, he'll let them come back. That one more time he will, okay, I'll have mercy on my people one more time. Mercy on Zion. And one more time he's going to choose Jerusalem. You think, gosh, when did that happen? Was that during the days of the Maccabees? Was that during the days of when Yeshua was here, 300 years after the Maccabees? Was that in 1948? Or is this in front of us, or this behind us, or what can we do with this? Well, here's the problem with reading in English. I just read 3 times it says that he will have mercy and restore his people once again, but yet the word there every time is ayin vav dalet. And if you look in the Red Dictionary, Ernest Klein's Etymological Dictionary, that word ayin vav dalet means again and again, repeatedly, forcefully, perpetually, continually, as many times as it takes. But it's translated once again. So my point is, we're taught that Yahuwah gave Israel, he gave his people this covenant. And he says, if you break the covenant, that's all over. I'm throwing you to the wolves. I'm calling in the pirates, and I'm going to let you be consumed by your enemies. And then Yeshua comes to say, oh, yes, that was a bad plan. We're going to make a new covenant. Forget the old one. Nail it to the cross. Do away with it.
Didn't see that coming.
Well, it was a valiant effort, but just not enough. But what Yahweh says, there's this other phrase here where it's in Psalms 89, I think is where it was. I was looking at a couple different things, where he said he will never mask over or camouflage or change the look of what he said in his covenant, nor will he change or vary, alter, the word is shana, what comes out of his mouth. And he says, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to lie to David. I'm not going to confuse my beloved. I'm going to tell them exactly what's going on. I'm going to give it to them, and it's going to be the same testimony every time, repeatedly and forcefully. Now, I have a choice. I can listen to the doctrines of our modern era. There's this phrase, Zeitgeist. German words, I believe. Zeit is where you get, it's actually the Hebrew, Zayin Aleph Tav, and it means this one right here, Zayin Aleph Tav, that's the word Zeit. Geist is where you get the word ghost or spirit, so it's the spirit of this age, the Zeitgeist. They made a couple of videos, movies that you can watch a couple hours long, and they show you some very uncomfortable information. I'm not promoting it, I'm just saying you can look there if you want to see what's going on. But the point is, the spirit of this age, of our teachings from church, school, government, scientists, politics, medical, what we get from our authorities is that everything Yahweh said was a bad plan done away with. As a matter of fact, some people teach that according to Ezekiel 20:24, where he says, I've given you bad laws that nobody can live by, that's referring to what's called Sefer Torah, the book of the Torah. I completely disagree. Everything Yahweh said is good, that if a man does, he will live by them. And in the book of Ezekiel 20, he says at least 4 times, he gave us chokim, laws, commands, statutes, ordinances. We were talking earlier about the different ways that English uses words to describe these, and it shifts around, it moves around, so you really don't know what exactly he's saying until you look at it in Hebrew. But he says, I gave you rulings, principles, ways of living righteously, that if you do them, you will live. And if you don't do them, if you don't do what he commanded, that's the definition of sin. Sin is doing unrighteousness, which is not doing righteousness, which is not doing what he said, because it says in the Psalms, doing your Torah is what righteousness is, by definition. So he said, if you do what I say, you will live. But then because his people refused to do what he said and did other things, he says, okay, I'm going to give you over to your enemies, scatter you amongst the nations, and there you will I will give you through the hand of your enemies, is the way I read it, I will give you through the hand of your enemies bad laws that you cannot live by, such as martial law. Don't go out of your house, can't go to the store, you better store up on toilet paper, and then we're going to take it away because it's against the law of horde. And it's like, oh, come on, what is it, this or that? Oh, it's going to be both, and we're going to slap you around and blah, 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 poke you in the eyes like the Three Stooges or something. And it's like, oh, wow. And people are saying that is the Sefer Torah. That's the book of the Torah. No, it's not. But that's what we're told. Here's another interesting thing in Deuteronomy 4. If you look at the beginning of Deuteronomy 4, he makes it a really big deal. Verse 23, beware for yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of Yahweh your Elohim that he sealed with you, and you make for yourselves a carved image, a likeness of anything, as Yahweh your Elohim commanded you. And previously, he said, verse 4, chapter 4, verse 1, now, O Israel, listen to the decrees and the ordinances that I teach you to perform, so that you may live, and that you will come and possess the land that Yahweh, the Elohim of your forefathers, gives you. You shall not add to the word that I command, nor shall you subtract from it, to observe the commandments. But if we're told, he changed his mind, don't observe the commandments. I could give you a huge list of how many times he said, you shall observe these commandments and perform them. Verse 6, you shall safeguard and perform them, for it is your wisdom and discernment in the eyes of the people who shall hear these decrees and say, surely such a wise and discerning people is this great nation. He goes on saying that we should observe these things. And then we're told, no, they're nailed to the cross, done away with. You couldn't do these things. He never expected you to do these things. It's absolutely impossible to do these things. Don't even bother. Don't even try. There was one person on the internet who said, if I tried to do an instruction, keep the Sabbath day or something, it would be a sin, because now I'm trusting my own righteousness rather than the righteousness of being in the blood, under the blood of Yeshua, of Jesus, for his being my propitiation. And it's like, wait a minute. So if we do what he says, that's a sin? Because we'd be defiling the benefit of the blood? That's turning everything upside down. That's doing everything backwards. And yet that's preached as gospel truth. It's like, well, that's pretty confusing. He says here, Deuteronomy 4, Yahweh spoke for you, verse 12, from the midst of the fire you were hearing the sound of words, but you were not seeing a likeness, only a sound. This is a really big deal that he's saying this on purpose. He told you of his covenant, that he commanded you to observe the 10 declarations, and he inscribed them on 2 stone tablets. Yahweh commanded me, Moshe speaking here, at that time to teach you decrees and ordinances, that you shall perform them in the land to which you cross to possess it. And I've heard people say, we're not in the land. We're not in the land. We don't have to do it. We're not in the land. But you shall have greatly beware for your souls, for you did not see any likeness on the day Yahweh spoke to you at Horeb from the midst of the fire, lest you act corruptly and make for yourselves a carved image, a likeness of any shape, a form of a male or a female, a form of any animal that is on the earth, a form of any winged bird that flies in the heaven, a form of anything that creeps on the ground, a form of any fish that is in the water under the earth. Unless you raise your eyes to the heaven and you see the sun, the moon, and the stars, the entire legion of heaven, and you be drawn astray and bow down to them and worship them, which Yahweh your Elohim has apportioned to all the peoples under the entire heaven. But Yahweh has taken you and withdrawn you from the iron crucible from Egypt to be a nation of heritage to him as this very day. So as this people of heritage, he says, be careful lest you make a graven image, a carved image, of anything. And yet in our churches we have statues of Jesus and the Virgin Mary. Are those not statues of both male and female? And he says that is what will profane you. Beware, beware. We can't beware if we're doing what the preacher says. Then he goes on to say, let's read a little further. Verse 24 of Deuteronomy 4. For Yahweh your Elohim, he is a consuming fire, a jealous God. That word is El, translated God, Kona, like Kona coffee, like Kona in Hawaii, Kuf Nun Aleph. Jealous, zealous, and he's just really fired up about his stuff. And other verses say that he's looking for a people who will be just fired up, zealous about his own stuff, fanatical. Verse 25, when you beget children and grandchildren have been long in the land, you will grow corrupt. What do you mean they're going to grow corrupt? What are they going to do? The one thing that irritates him more than anything else, you will make a carved image, a likeness of anything, and you will do evil in the eyes of Yahweh your Elohim to anger him. Moshe speaking still, I appoint heaven and earth this day to bear witness against you. You will surely perish quickly from the land to which you're crossing the Jordan to possess. You will not have lengthy days upon it, for you will be destroyed. Yahweh will scatter you among the peoples. You will be left few in number among the nations where Yahweh will lead you. There you will serve the gods, the handiwork of man, wood and stone, which do not see, do not hear, do not eat, do not smell. They're inanimate. They're not alive. They are not the living Elohim. Any image of anything cannot be our God. Even if it looks like a man with nice long curly hair and blue eyes and the gentle Jesus, meek and mild, cannot be our God if it's a form of an image. Now, that's what Moshe says, that's what Yahweh Elohim says, that's what I'm reading, that's what I choose to believe. You can have any God you want. You can have any God you want. But it goes on to verse 29, it says, Yahweh speaking to his people Israel, having been scattered across the face of the earth, he said, from there, that's speaking of time and place, speaking of us here, 2020. You will seek Yahweh your Elohim, and you will find him. This is an active verb, seek. It's not just believe, it's seeking, looking, questing, hunting him down. Where would he be? Where would he hide himself? Where would he possibly hide himself? If you search for him with all your heart and all your soul. You know that song you learn as a kid? Dun, 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 dun. Heart and soul on the piano, one of the first songs you learn. That's coming from Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy also 30 says, with all your heart and all your soul. Now this is this fervent intent. I gotta find him. I gotta find him. Well, just go to church and listen. Just open up your English Bible and read it. No, that's not searching. Just open up your textbook, your encyclopedia. Listen to the professor. That's not searching. How do you find him with all your heart and soul? How do you look for him when you are in distress and all these things have befallen you at the end of days? Why, that's this week. They're pouring out such incredible distress upon us, telling us this is the end of days. They're saying as of a couple days ago, oh, life will never be like it was in December. Life will never again be like it was last week because they've got this quarantine, martial law, everything's coming down. They're going to force vaccinations, FEMA camps, slaughterhouses, and who knows what, crash the market. Well, talk about a distress. you will return. That word that's pronounced, and you will return, in Hebrew is spelled Shin Bet Tav. That spells phonetically Shabbat. Shabbat. It's spelled Shabbat. The word Shabbat literally means to sit, to rest, to dwell, but it also means to return, and it also is the exact 3 letters used to spell the 7th day of the week when you sit and Shabbat at peace, believing that Yahweh is our Elohim, who will conduct, which is to channel the terms and stipulations of the covenant that he made with our forefathers to us presently in this day. And it says, you will return Shabbat unto Yahweh Elohim and hearken to his voice. Now that's listening, but that's also Shema. That's reading, Bakol. That's listening. And that word, listening to his voice, there's this other word, Kara, Kufresh Aleph, which is translated Leviticus, Vayikra, but it means to be summoned, to be invited to learn how to read the Scripture. In Hebrew, to be called up to read the Torah. To listen to his voice as he spoke and have an ear to attend to it by doing accordingly. That's what the word means. And then it says, for Yahweh, your Elohim, is a merciful Elohim. He will not abandon you nor destroy you, and he will not forget the covenant of your forefathers that he swore to them. There's another verse that says, we may forget, but he will do the remembering for us. He continues, Ayin Vav Dalet, to remember repeatedly, again and again, forcefully, without changing anything. I've heard it said, preached from the pulpit, God doesn't change, but he changed the rules. Well, according to these verses I read, he will not change the rules. So now I have a choice. Do I believe what's preached from the pulpit, or do I believe what I read in Hebrew? But the pulpit says, oh no, we have the Holy Spirit. And he's telling us that these New Testament words are telling us that he changed the covenant. Now, he maybe made another covenant, a different type of covenant or whatever, but he promised that he will not change these words. He will not change these rules. And we can trust him, we can count on him. And when we are in distress, we can go back to these words and trust in his comfort. Now, if you go ahead a little bit in, jump ahead to, just for what it's worth, chapter 5 in Deuteronomy is where he restates the 10 Commandments. And then it goes on to, at the end of chapter 5, Deuteronomy, to verse 24, you should approach and hear whatever Yahweh or Elohim will say. This is what the people were saying to Moshe. And you should speak to us whatever Yahweh, our Elohim, will speak to you. That's the role of the preacher. Then we will hear and we will do. The reason why we have preachers standing up front is because the people said, we don't want to hear what he says. If we hear any more, we're just going to die. We just can't handle this. That's in verse 22. You go listen to him and you tell us what he says. But when we have preachers coming back and changing what he said, we're believing something. Then we respond to events in the news and we get freaked out and we start to panic. And then we hear from our reporters and journalists and talking heads and politicians that, oh no, scary stuff. Oh no, scary stuff. What do we do? What do we do? Go back to these words. Chapter 5, verse 29. Be careful to act as Yahweh your Elohim commanded you. Do not stray to the right or left. On the entire way that Yahweh your Elohim commanded you shall you go, so that you shall live. And it will be good for you, and you shall prolong your days in the land that you shall possess. Chapter 6. Verse 2, so you will fear Yahweh your Elohim to observe all these decrees and commandments that I command you. It's like, am I saying go back under the law? No, this isn't a matter of going back under the law. This isn't a matter of turning our back on grace. This is a matter of just do what he said. Verse 3, chapter 6 of Deuteronomy. You shall hearken, O Israel, and beware to perform, so that it'll be good for you, so that you will increase very much, as Yahweh, the Elohim of your forefathers, spoke to you into this land flowing with milk and honey. And then this famous thing, the Shema, Hear, O Israel, Yahweh Elohim, Yahweh is the one and only. There's the way it's translated. Shema Israel, Yahuwah Eloheinu, Yahuwah Echad. Well, he also then goes on to say, you shall teach these things thoroughly. Let me back up. These matters that I command you this day shall be upon your heart. You shall teach them thoroughly to your children, and you shall speak of them when you sit in your home, when you walk on the way, when you retire, and when you arise. Bind them as a sign upon your arm, let them be as ornaments between your eyes, and write them on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates. Has anybody done that? You folks have done that. What is that thing between your eyes? Is that a little ornament of a...
Bindi?
Is that a bindi?
No.
No, it's not a bindi. So you didn't do that one. What about, did you wrap the stuff on your arms? Oh, hey, you know, there's another way to translate these things. The interesting thing, this ornament between your eyes, is pei tet tet, I believe is the word here, or tet, lamed tet tet pei tav is the word, and it literally means a drip or a droplet, like a water drop, like a...
Do it again. We love that sound. God, he's got that
drop.
down.
Anyway, the point is,
Come on, Frank.
that's the thing you're supposed to have as an ornament between your eyes. And what does
water
that mean?
drop?
That's what the word means, a water drop. But it's also a very similar word, a derivative of the word that means walk mincingly. It also, tet yod pei, is the sound of a water drop. The point is, what is a drop? And to walk mincingly as a child have to do as an ornament between your eyes. And the word ayin yod nun is the way it's spelled, literally means to look carefully, balance exactly, weigh carefully. It's like, what have we been doing for the past few years? Trying to do exactly that, figure out, well, what calendar should we observe? What's the day? When does the day start? How does he expect us to do this Passover? And we're almost walking mincingly like little children, like, you know, a 2-year-old toddler just learning how to walk, and they kind of stagger, and it's like, just ask your rabbi, do what the Jews do. They wouldn't lie to you. I mean, they wouldn't tell you anything about what year it really is, who the Messiah really is. They wouldn't lie about stuff important like the Noahide laws, and if you speak the name of the Almighty, if you say the word Yahuwah, you could be put to death because they're not allowed to say that. And go ask the Jews. No, don't. Well, go ask your pastor. Only, you know, Yeshua said in the book of Revelation, it's like, whoever makes and perpetuates falsehood has no place in my kingdom. So when he says, the seventh day is the day of the Kadosh regard, of remembering that he is the creator of heaven and earth. And they say, well, we changed the day in order to prove that our voice supersedes written scripture. I mean, should you take them at their word? They're making stuff up. They have no place in his kingdom. When they changed the 7 Moedim and give us Christmas and Easter, should we take them at the word? They have no place in his kingdom. When he says his name is Yahuwah and Ehyeh, and they say, oh, it's the Lord our God, which is the names of pagan deities, should we take them at the word? They have no place in their kingdom. Go ask whatever authority you choose. Go ask your pastor, your professor, your rabbi, your cleric, clerk, the one who knows how to read. That's where we get the word clergy. It's all from the same sound bite. Find your authority, because either these words are true or they're not. Either we're going to hang on these words like a little droplet hangs on a thin thread and dangles, or we're going to all burn. Eventually, either burn here when they nuke us, or burn in hell, or what are they going to do? It's like, whoa, hey, wait a minute. What is this thing about Shabbat Shalom and finding peace? And if he says, you got to do all this stuff, and it's like, well, wait a second, do what stuff? And let's get on to Deuteronomy, verse 6, chapter 6, verse 21. Verse 20, if your child asks you tomorrow, let's just back up. Verse 16. You shall not test Yahweh Elohim as you tested him at Massah. That was the place where they were bitterly complaining, and more of the story in the Torah. But verse 17. You shall surely observe the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim, and his testimonies, and his decrees that he commanded you. You shall do what is fair and good in the eyes of Yahweh, so that it'll be good for you. What goes around comes around. Whatever you do comes back. With the measure you use, measure to you. Blessed are the merciful, they shall receive mercy. Balanced scales of justice. That's the word. Mishpat is his throne rests. I was speaking to a guy earlier. Imagine a bowling ball. Put a piece of plywood on the bowling ball, then stick a chair on top of that. Yahweh's sitting in it. It's like, whoa, you move a fraction of it, the thing's going to tip. But that picture, it says in the Psalms that Yahweh's throne is poised, is a balance on Mishpat and Zadikah. The foundation of his throne, in the word Mishpat, is perfectly balanced scales, which is justice. And it's this word, as you do, so it comes back. And Yahweh is not an observer of persons. If you do good, good comes back. If you do evil, evil comes back. If you're generous, generosity comes back. If you're stingy, stinginess comes back. Everything is return of your own head, your own ways on your own head. That's what his throne is all about. And if we say, oh, that was nailed to the cross. No, it wasn't. That was not nailed to the cross. That's the way of the entire universe that he ruled. Oh, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. You know what's going to happen when he comes back? A man's way is going to be returned on his own head. And if he uses an opportunity, a crisis is an opportunity riding a dangerous wind, according to, I believe, a Chinese proverb. This crisis we find ourselves in, either it took Yahweh by surprise, and he's going, oh no, what's going on? I can't help this. Or he's saying, that's right. A man's way is going to be returned on his own head. And he's going to do it to the wicked, and he's going to do it to the righteous, and he's going to return a man's way on his own head. Interesting thing, there's a certain word, Nadab. There's two guys, Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu. Weird word. No, it's not a weird word. Nun Dalet Bet, N-D-B, Nadab. And it literally means volunteer generosity, philanthropy, giving generously. And he says, with measure you use, it's measured to you. And here recently we've had in this country swarming, hoarding of the stores. The president just got in the other day and he says there's no lack of supplies. There is no lack of food to be had, but there's the mentality of hoarding and gathering because people don't want to be caught. And it's like, guess what? If you've never in your life had the chance to give out of an abundance, you do now. You can choose to give generously if you have a stash to somebody else who might need it. Now, other people are just grabbing more to make their stash bigger. That's not the same thing as a need. But to suddenly find yourself in the position because you used every last cent you had to get a stash so you can endure a 30-day, maybe a 90-day mandatory isolation. I'm not saying give all your stuff away, but I'm just saying to think as a generous Nadab, a generous giver, and Yahweh says, according to your ways will be returned on your own head. There's something to consider. Why is he bringing this upon us? If you've never given before, give now. Give. Something about casting your bread upon the waters and then in the future it'll come back. What does that mean? If you help the widow, the orphan, the destitute, it'll come back. That's what he said. That's the balancing scales of the mishpat, of the kingdom of Yahuwah. But he goes on to say, this is talking about when he took him into the land. This is Deuteronomy, so they haven't gotten into the land yet. Verse 16, it'll be that when Yahweh your Elohim brings you to the land that Yahweh swore to your forefathers, to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, to give you great and good cities that you didn't even build, houses filled with every good thing that you didn't fill, chiseled cisterns that you didn't have to chisel, that's carved out holes in the ground and filled with like cement and plaster to store water, orchard and olive trees that you didn't even plant, you shall eat, be satisfied. Beware for yourself, lest you forget Yahuwah, who took you out of the land of Egypt, from the house of slavery. Yahweh your Elohim shall you fear, him shall you serve, and his name shall you swear. Deuteronomy 6:13. In the name of Yahuwah your Elohim shall you swear. You cannot say, God damn it, and think that you're taking his name in vain. You're not swearing, and you're not using his name. His name is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and however you pronounce that, there's a number of different ways, but we'll let people squabble. In his name, you shall make a vow, and then you better keep that vow as if your life depended on it, because you've break that vow that you called out in his name. That's what this means. The word swear is Shin Bet Ayin, which is the same as the number 7. That word means to swear a vow, to take an oath, and to take upon yourself the curse for breaking that vow, that 7 times over you will be penalized according to the nature of the vow you made. Very serious stuff. And then he says, goes right into that and says, you shall not follow after the gods of others. That word is Elohim Achrim. Elohim is gods, translated, and Achar is future next strange other. Acharim is the plural, speaking of the gods. It's the second of the 10 Commandments. Lo yehi lecha Elohim Achrim al panei. Do not cause or allow there to be, don't put your hand to causing to exist. Elohim Achrim in connection, in conjunction to, that's Ayin Lamed, panei, my face. So here we have the invisible God, the invisible Elohim speaking words, making sure his people saw no image, not male or female, animal, bird, lizard, fish, nothing. And then finally, a 1,000 years later, he says, I give up. I'm just going to come down in the face of a human being and expect you to worship me. And if you don't worship me, you're going to burn in hell. But if you do worship me, then you're acceptable. And the Jews say, what the heck is going on here? That can't be our Elohim wearing a human face. It can't happen according to these words. Well, they better believe it or they're going to burn in hell. Well, so they either have to reject these words or burn in hell, or reject him and burn in hell. Why would he do this to us? Why would Yahuwah, our Elohim, torment us with this logical conundrum that we have no ability or means to answer? Why would he do this? What does he expect us to do? Put a gun to our heads and get there and say, well, yeah, I want to see what the truth is. You might as well let me see now. Which door do I go in? The one that says Yahweh or the one that says Jesus? If I choose Jesus, I'm not choosing Yahweh. But if I choose Yahweh, I'm not choosing Jesus. What do I do? Why would he do this to us? Why would he drive us insane? Or would he? Just read these words. This is why the Catholics say, do not try to read the Bible. It'll drive you crazy. It'll drive you insane. It'll drive you mad. That's what they say. Don't do this. You have to be a beam of light gifting you to have the grace to read these words and keep your sanity. But the interesting thing, the word spelled shin pei he in Hebrew is the word for lip language and tongue, referring to the Hebrew language. Lashon, shin is teeth, like 2 football teams on a line of scrimmage, and that's the word for other languages, other tongues. But the word shafah, shin pei he, is the word for language, lip of the Hebrew tongue, the Hebrew lip, and it means to restore to health and cure from lunacy. So I might agree with the Catholics. You try to read this in English, Latin, Greek, it'll drive you insane. Better be careful. But you read it in Hebrew, and it has to restore to health and bring us back to a place of sanity and a place of a comfort of shalom, because we know we have to trust these words with our life and our life after death. So what does he say? It'll be good for you, and you shall come and possess the good land that Yahweh swore to your forefathers to thrust away all your enemies from before you, as Yahweh spoke. Thrust away all your enemies. My brother's been over in Nigeria. Boko Haram is sitting there literally chopping up, beheading, burning the Christians. Where's the Christian God, and why isn't he protecting his believers? That's the question, isn't it? That's the big question. Where's the Christian God? Where's the Jewish God? And it's like, I don't know. I can't answer that question. But all I can tell you this is that I have to take the sum total of all my life, all my learning, all my energy, all my capacity, and focus it on this and say, I choose to believe that Yahweh said he will thrust away all my enemies before me if I return to his words, to Yahuwah Zavot, my Redeemer, my Savior, my Deliverer, Yahuwah Zavot. And I believe that Yeshua is the genuine Mashiach. But then you have to define those terms, translated Messiah. But what does that mean, and how does that fit in? And I believe that the answer to that entire mystery is wrapped up in the meaning of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. That's in other videos. But it goes on to verse 20 and says, listen, a little child, walk mincingly as a child. That's what the ornament between your eyes. It's like like this water drop between your eyes is this little dangling thing, like on a thin thread. What thin thread? There's this thin thread that gets into a whole other word, which is another part of that interesting puzzle story. But he says, just try to walk this way, even though you're kind of barely can walk, but think about this stuff. Gets on to Malachi 3:16. Then the men who have a fear, a yirah, Yod Resh Aleph, of Yahweh, they got him together amongst themselves and they talked about his stuff, his Shem. Name, fame, renown, reputation. Yahweh's stuff. Meanings of his letters, the meanings of his Moed, the meaning of his Shabbat, the meaning of commands. And Yahweh said, hey, and he calls his angel over and he says, his scribe, and he says, take note, put a book here and write down the names of each one of these guys, considering my stuff. And on the day that I reveal my greatest treasure, my Segula, then the entire universe will see the difference it makes to be a man who ponders the Shem of Yahuwah as composed and compared to anybody else who is too distracted, has too many other obligations, too many other considerations, it's just too hard for me, whatever. Those who ponder my Shem versus anybody else who doesn't. And then you'll see. We're pondering his Shem here. If your child asks you tomorrow, saying, what are the testimonies and the decrees and the ordinances that Yahweh or Elohim commanded you? Give it to us. Lay it on the table. Let's look at it. Now, is he going to go through and give a list of 613 that are impossible to keep? This is what he says, and it's a few verses, and in the interest of time, I don't know if we can get through the whole thing, but I'd say there's another way to translate these verses that tell us a little bit more insight, which I hope to get to in just a moment, but let me read you the Stones Tanakh translation. This is what you say to your child who asks you, give me the lowdown, time's up, I can't go to college, they're about to nuke us, they're about to vaccinate us and melt our brain matter with their stupid vaccines. What are they saying? You shall say to your child, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and Yahuwah took us out of Egypt with a strong hand. Yahuwah placed signs and wonders, great and harmful, against Egypt, and against Pharaoh, and against his entire household before our eyes. That's the Exodus story, what they were supposed to read at Passover. Verse 23, and he took us out of there in order to bring us, to give us the land that he swore to our forefathers. That's the land of Canaan, where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had dwelt. Yahuwah commanded us to perform all these decrees, to fear Yahweh our Elohim for our good, all the days, to give us life, as this very day. Well, that's anti-Christian. And it will be a merit for us. That word is zadikah, which is also translated righteousness. So you could say, it says, that'll be righteousness. It'll be considered righteousness. This is what the book says. If we believe on the blood of the Savior, that's not what it says. It'll be a righteousness for us if we are careful to perform this entire commandment before Yahweh Elohim as he commanded us. So the kids just said, hey, what's the commandments? He talked about the Exodus, and it'll say it's righteousness if we are careful to tell the story. It's like, where's the faith? Where's the blood? Where's the cross? Where's the Messiah? Where's the sacrifices? What the heck is he saying? So I'm saying if you read it in English, it leaves you hanging. Like the little dangly drop on the little thin thread. So, real quick, what are the testimonies, decrees, and ordinances? Say unto your son, our whole entire life experience were slaves serving Pharaoh in Egypt. And the word Egypt is mitzarim. Mitzar, Tsar, Zadi Resh is where we get the word Caesar, Kaiser, and the Tsar of Russia, spelled in English C-Z-A-R, and it literally means like a rock in a hard place. They're being squished and he can't move. And it's like, that's the picture of the word Mitzrayim. And then it says, and export or publish Yahweh from Mitzrayim with a strong, intense hand. Verse 22, and Yahweh gives signs and wonders. Well, the interesting thing is that the word sign is alephav tav tav. But alephav tav literally is a word that means oath, sign, symbol, and the letter of the alphabet. Just like a musical note represents a sound, a letter of the alphabet represents a concept, a phonetic sound, but also the spelling of words. He gave us Well, whenever they came out of Egypt, they were given the writing with his finger on the tables of stone. They were given written letters. And mem pe tov, that's the word for wonder. But pe tov is something that opens, something, signs, and something that, an opening of wonders. Gidolim, that's great. Resh ayin yod mem is resh ayin is the word for evil, but it's also the word for shout, noise, thinking, thundering. It's like this great and thundering wonders. Picture what he did on Mount Sinai. Picture what he did with the Ten Commandments in Egypt. Pharaoh and his entire house before our eyes. But that same word eyes literally means not just the physical eyes, yes we saw it, but it means that we could comprehend, that we could weigh, measure, balance, that we could look at that and said, this is a picture of Yahweh Elohim. This, yeah, you go, man. This, the guy who orchestrated these 10 plagues, the guy who split the waters and took us across. And there's verses that say, where is the exploits of our great Elohim? When's he ever going to do it? All I've heard my whole life, the Ruskies were going to nuke us. Then the Chinese were going to invade and cut the country in half. And it's like, then we've got the beast and the Antichrist and the tribulation and the man of sin and the false prophet and the NWO and the, oh God, it's like, where's Yahweh when you need him? Yeah, where is he? Why doesn't he show up? Why doesn't he do any of this stuff? Why doesn't he return and do these great exploits? Ezekiel 36:23. You guys, speaking of Israel, he scattered them into the nations, is you guys profaned my name. You guys ruined my reputation. You told the wrong story. You gave me bad hype in the eyes and the understanding of the calculation of the Gentiles amongst whom we've been scattered. And when you make my Shem Kadosh, or he says it the other way, I will make my Shem Hagadol, my great name, Kadosh, which is pure and blatantly on display, when I make it, or when you make it Kadosh, and it's like two different ways to translate that, but the idea is when we start telling the true story, when we start representing him as who he actually is, then he'll step into those shoes and go walking with him and stomp the earth and kick the rear ends of wiping out anybody in his way. In our defense, for our regard. What might it look like? Might it look like shutting down the economy, if not just this community, this state, this country, the world? Imagine what's going on. Shutting down the economy of the entire world all at once. Who can pull that off? Was that the Illuminati, the Bilderbergs, the NWO, the RPC, the United Kingdom, the USS? Who's doing this? Is it the devil? Is it Yahweh? The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. The world and they that dwell therein. The Lord's? No, Yahuwah, because he made it with his own hand, the maker, thus possessor of heaven and earth. There's no other power. He somewhere is involved in this, but where? Do we trust in him with all our heart? What's this go on to say? Signs and wonders thundering in our eyes so we could calculate. Then here's a very interesting word. Vav, aleph, vav, tav, nun, vav. Our sign, nun vav suffixes means our. Our aleph vav tav, our oath, our signal. Does that mean he's signaling us? He gave us signs? No, this means our signal, as if we're signaling him. We're signaling him what? That we're finally awake, that we're finally listening? Hey vav zadi yod aleph means to publish. Mem shin mem, from there. Our signal, publishing from there, lamed mem ayin nun, to address a letter where? Hey bet yod aleph, the arrival, the beginning, the coming of aleph tav nun vav. Well, that's our aleph tav. Aleph tav is this, represents where you're at, what you're about, the whole thing from A to Z, Alpha, Omega, Aleph to Tav. The whole picture, our Aleph, Tav, Nun. But Aleph, Tav, Nun also means a tonic by which you gain strength. Like a vaccine. Or like eating a shot of vitamins and minerals and whatever suits you. Lamed, Tav, Tav. That word means underneath or sub, hypo. In other words, from under, from within, there's a tonic to gain strength. Lanu, for us, Aleph Tav Haaretz, You could say anywhere here in the earth, running, Aleph, I will, Resh, Zadi, Aretz, run, Aleph, Shin, Resh, confirmed, straight, fit, and proffer, just like he said. It's translated who, that, which, but it's to authenticate and confirm the exact straight. It's the root of the word for Yod, Shin, Resh, Aleph, Lamed, Israel. So, Asher. So you basically say, our signal, publishing the Shem, the name, the reality of understanding what's going on, that's why we're making these videos, arriving or bringing into being, import, the one word Zadi Aleph is export, this word Bet Aleph is import, this tonic to gain strength. The truth that we're trying to express in these videos is the tonic by which we live, which is to regard the words of Yahweh, our Elohim. Straightforward, confirm, Nun, Shin Bet Ayin. That is basically doing or fulfilling the vow. That word Shavas, 7. Lamed Aleph Bet Tav Yod Nun Vav. According to our forefathers, according to that same word forefather, Abat, can mean also according to the desire of our father. Well, that means not only as pictured, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all the other previous generations, but Yahuwah, our Abenu, our father, as he is pictured. So it's like, well, what are we supposed to do? That was the question your children are asking. Give me the lowdown. Is the Torah bad laws nobody can live by? Is it works not grace? Is it grace not works? Just give me what are we supposed to do? And then he says, the next verse, 24. Vav, Yod Zadi Vav Nun Vav. Well, Yod Zadi is this command. Zadi Vav is this expression of a command. Our speaking, our expression, our command, Yahweh is the next word, Yod Vav He, which means he will cause it to exist. And this is Lamed Ayin Shin Vav Tav. That means as doing, regarded as doing. Lamed is this prefix letter of a consideration, and Ayin Shin He means do, produce, publish, make it happen, induce, compel. Just this is the doing. In Spanish, the word might be hacer, H-A-C-E-R, which means to make or to do. That's the same word as Ayin Shin He. Pronounced sometimes as Asha or Oseh. Oseh Fele. Hasn't he done? That's the doing of wonderful paleo hidden things. But this is the doing, Aleph Tav Kol HaChohim Hala. The doing of all these instructions, Lamed, Yod Resh Aleph He, as considered to be fearing Aleph Tav Yahweh Eloheinu. So if we are doing what? Doing all these instructions, which is considered as, or will be accounted as, fearing Yahweh or Elohim, for good, letov, lanu, for us, all the days. That's even now, lachai tinu, that's, which is for our life, like ka hayom hazah, like these days. Again, speaking back into Moshe saying, look, we just came through 40 years in the wilderness, about to go in the promised land. Look, Yahweh has sustained us. He's done everything he said. And he's saying, well, then doing what? He's telling the story in Egypt. He's talking about the Exodus. They're rehearsing the Pesach, the Passover. And he says, if you do and tell these stories, it goes on to say, righteousness, zadikah, it will be our for guarding and doing all the mitzvot. The word mitzvot means try to find out. The word matzah, the matzah bread, also means find out how to do these that Yahweh Elohim, like that he commanded. What's the bottom line? What are we supposed to do? If we tell this story of the Exodus, and I thought, is there something more to this? He said it'll be like this tonic filling you up with life-giving, almost like this protection. It's like if you sit down on the Sabbath day, like he said, if you dwell in tabernacles for a week in the fall, like he said, you eat unleavened bread, like he said, you tell the story of the Pesach and count 50 days at Shavuot, like he said, blow trumpets on this one day, and consider giving to those who are much needier than you at Yom Kippur, like he said, it will be the proof that you are indeed fearing him, regarding him. And he says, the ones who fear Yahuwah and do not fear the Elohim Achrim will be saved, redeemed, delivered. And as we said, Yahweh said from 2 Kings 17:39, I will save you from the hand of your enemies. The absolute confidence, because he said so. Why do we keep all these instructions? Not because we're working out our salvation. It's so that I can read these instructions and say, he gave us remedy. He gave us a provision. It's a legal matter, even in our secular courts, that you can't just make a law and slam everybody, lock everybody up. You must provide a remedy for anything that you're calling a breaking of the law or some criminal act. You must provide a remedy, and that's the balancing. If somebody steals something, pay it back, pay it 7 times more, do some community service, whatever it might be. You must provide a remedy. And Yahweh's remedy is, I told you to fear me, and you go, I don't know how to fear him. Tell this story and do what I said. Sit down on the days I said, call upon his name, help one another, what is good and what is fair. Mishpat. The measure you use at this time of crisis will be measured back on your own head for now and for eternity. You can claim, oh yeah, I'm going to treat my fellow rotten and then get forgiveness. I wouldn't count on it. I'm not saying the blood of the Savior isn't sufficient to cover any sin, but you might not want to count on that when he said the throne of his kingdom is poised and balanced on the fact of mishpat, according to a man's way, is returned on his own head. If you repent, there's a certain type of forgiveness that you're not going to get if you don't repent, even if you claim to believe in the blood. The point is, we're at a time of crisis. The measure you use will be measured to you. You got to share to the people that need some help. The heart of giving, of Nadab, generosity, will go on record. Ponder Yahweh's ways. There's something about this word betok, bet tet chet, which means security, safety, tranquility of absolute confidence. And Yahweh talks about this in his word all the time. Is that faith? It's a little different than faith. There's an absolute tranquil security, trusting that he is our fortress, our strength, in him we trust. And I could go on and on with these various different meanings of words, but it all boils down to, okay, here we are. For whatever reason, who knows what's really going on, there may not even be a virus out there. Maybe, I don't know. Some people say it's activated by 5G, and yet they're pushing 5G as the thing that's going to save us. And it might be the very thing killing us. I don't know. The point is,
Wow.
all this theory comes down to the real practicality right now. Are you going to have a heart of fear? I've heard other people say, fear sets up a resonance inside your own cells that make you susceptible to the very things they're trying to put out there and make you afraid about. So they put these bugs out there that are more like robots, they're not even living organisms, some virus thing, and then it finds this weak vibration that it can latch onto. And the weak vibration is generated by fear. The one command most often repeated, al tira, do not fear. Fear Yahuwah, your Elohim, not any other Elohim Achrim, other God, other deity, other power. It's like these bugs, these viruses, those are Elohim. The doctors, those are Elohim. The scientists, the politicians, those are Elohim. The army troops in the streets, those are Elohim. It's not just names that we shouldn't mention, the Norse deities, the Mesoamerican deities, the Chinese deities, the Greek and Roman deities. It's not those guys, names of the days of the week and the names of the months. Those are not just the Canaanite deities. Those are not just the names we shouldn't be mentioned and be afraid of. It's the devil. He has no power over me because I don't yield him any power. Yahuwah is my Elohim. Zechariah 13:9. Yahweh will bring the whole city of Jerusalem into and through the fire. 2/3 will die. 1/3 He'll bring through and purify and refine them as gold and silver is refined. And he says, he'll say, this is my people. While they are saying, Yahuwah Elohi, Yahweh is my Elohim.
Hallelujah.
That's the script. It's translated, the Lord is my God. That's not the script. That's a different language, a different translation, different vow. And it's like, does it really mean, do you know how to pronounce? I'm not mocking somebody's heart, but we've been lied to. He said, if you say these two words, Yahuwah Elohi, then I will say, this is my people. They know my name. Another verse, oh yeah, I know how to say Yahweh, Yahuwah, Jehovah, Yahuwah. What's his name? I don't think it's about the phonetics. I think it's about understanding his covenant, his character, his nature. And if you do, you'll understand why he regards his day and his moedim, the testimonies of his identity, so hugely, which is all wrapped up in his language, which is the Ivrit, which is this Hebrew, and the pictographs of Paleo, which are legitimate, though the great scholars of our age think not. The point is, that's all his Shem. And to know his name is to know how he's identified himself and his Ruach, which resonates. And to resonate with his Ruach in our cells, John G. Lake up in Spokane, he'd go in and they'd drop live cultures of bad bugs in his hand and they would die. Somehow his resonant frequency just killed them. I think that's why Yeshua couldn't get sick with those things either, and why he could touch a leprous man and not get leprosy. Somehow we're supposed to be resonating at that frequency. And so we take some essential oils and we listen to certain music and it's like, well, that'll help, but ponder Yahweh's words. That's what sets it up from the inside out. I'm saying that there's certain benefits to all these things. Other people talk against those other things. And it's like, look it, you eat a bunch of sugar and that's going to fragment you. You drink Kangen water, that'll set you up. And it's like, whoa, where's your Elohim? Is it? There's all these things. There's all these things. Find your path. Walk the straight derek, the Yeshar derek of Yahuwah's words. Ponder his words. Put your mind on these letters. Contemplate his Shem. And he said, I will save you from the hand of your enemies, whether it's Goliath or whether it's Corona. Either he meant it or he didn't. Either this covenant endures and is meaningful, significant, is true and valid even today, like he said, or it's a bunch of bunk, and you might as well,
Go eat at the wet market.
Huh?
Go eat at the Wuhan wet market.
Oh.
Eat soup du jour de bat, if you want.
Crazy.
He said, don't eat these things. It'll defile you and abominate you. Jesus died on the cross, nailed that law to the cross with it, and is it valid or not? Can you eat soup of bat and not get the disease that are in the bats?
Did you see that video Rhonda posted on her Facebook page?
Of what?
A Wuhan wet market.
Oh.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, they've been doing it for centuries.
Yeah,
they're
I
still
know.
here.
Dogs and eating dogs on.
My point is, we're either going to read these words and believe them and do them or not. And if we believe them and do them, every time that Yahweh said, I will do good to you, you will live. You shall remember Yahweh your Elohim. It is he who gives you strength to make wealth. You could say that's health. In order to establish his covenant, he swore to your forefathers as this day. Deuteronomy 8, verse 18. It's all over the place. It's all over the place. I either can read these words and believe them, or I can't. Choose whose voice you're going to listen to, and Yahweh be with you. Yivarechecha Yahuwah.
Hallelujah, Eric.
Hallelujah.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah.
Good message.
Thank you.
Until next time. Shalom. Shabbat shalom.